What's going on, guys? Hyper here, and in today's video we're taking a look at the blood decay on the BFA alpha, more specifically at all of the talents. There was a patch recently which pushed a lot of changes and removed quite a few of the talents that we have in Legion and added a few extra ones, as well as you can see here on the screen, reshuffled most of them to kind of open up some more talent choices and maybe move around some of the talents that might have been overshadowed by being in the same row with really strong talents, so we never took them. So first of all, we'll go over all of the talents that have been removed. We had a talent called Heart of Ice, and this was initially added in some earlier patches of the BFA alpha, and what it did is that it extended the duration of your IBF, but it seems like they completely scrapped the idea and just removed it from the talent tree. The second talent which they removed, which I'm actually super surprised to see being gone, is Spectral Deflection. Now you might notice that it's missing from the second row here. And what this talent did is whenever an ability or a mob hit you hard enough, instead of just consuming one bone shield, it consumed two and mitigated some extra damage. And this talent was really useful in high mythic pluses, as well as some bosses that hit super hard. Very Mattress on mythic comes to mind instantly, where you just take really strong melee attacks, but you have quite a bit of downtime in between. And this was completely removed, and I'm actually really surprised because it saw a lot of use in Mythic Plus and some use in raiding, especially at the high end. The third talent that is being removed is Blood Tap. And this talent is not exactly being removed, it's more like being reworked into a different ability, but for all intents and purposes, Blood Tap as a talent is gone. And then the fourth one is Tremble Before Me. Now this talent, if you don't know what it did, whenever you drop your D&D, it has a chance to immobilize targets within it for 3 seconds, interrupting their spellcast and everything. But it only really saw use during the Blood Decay Artifact Challenge, and outside of that, it was just in a row with such strong talents that you never really spec'd into it. The last talent which is being removed is Blood Mirror. And this again is one that I'm surprised to see being gone, because Blood Decays use this quite a bit once progress is over, because on progress you usually take Purgatory for the safety net, you're not super comfortable with the fights yet, so there is a chance that you might get hit by something that you didn't intend to, and you just have that safety net of Purgatory to get out of a sticky situation. But then once you become familiar with the fight and it's on farm and everything is easy, then you go into Blood Mirror because it gives you extra damage, and it also provides a little bit of extra mitigation, which Blood Decays kind of lack. So of course, with the removal of all of these talents, they had to add something instead of them. In the first row, we see Rune Strike being added. Like I mentioned, Blood Tap being gone, it's basically being reworked into Rune Strike. What this does is it has 2 charges on a 45-second cooldown, and it deals some physical damage and recharges 1 rune. So Blood Tap was on a 1-minute cooldown, if I remember correctly, so they reduced the cooldown by 15 seconds per charge, and you also get a little bit of damage on top of it. The downside of it, Blood Tap was not on the global cooldown, while Rune Strike is, and Rune Strike also requires a target for you to be able to activate it. In the second row, we see Hemostasis being added, and if you play Blood Decay in Legion, they know that this is basically the legendary shoulders. However, on live servers, for each stack, you would gain a 20% bonus on your Death Strike damage and healing instead of a 10%, so they nerfed it by 50%, but overall it should still be a pretty strong choice for single target. Next to it, of course, we see Consumption, the iconic Blood Decay ability from Legion, and this came from our artifact weapon. And with losing our artifact weapon for BFA, it kind of made sense for them to add this back as a talent. Now, one thing that they did change on it was change the cooldown from 45 seconds to 1 minute, so that's a 15-second increase. And they also reduced or removed the leech component from it, which also came from our artifact weapon. And this time around, it just works basically how it did pre-patch 7.2. So it just deals damage in a cone in front of you and heals you for 100% of that damage done. Then in the level 60 row, we see Grip of the Dead. So this was basically incorporated into Tightening Grasp before, where we got a 70% slow on our D&D. They removed that from Tightening Grasp, so now Tightening Grasp, all it does is reduce the cooldown of your mass grip, and they moved the D&D slow component into Grip of the Dead, so they basically just split the talent in half. And this time, as you can see here by the tooltip, it is a 90% slow, which decays by 10% every second that your D&D is active. And then in the level 90 row, we're getting a new talent, which is Voracious. And this talent is kind of interesting because every time you death strike, you get 15% leech for 6 seconds. But death striking does not extend the duration, so you can't just stack it up for like 30 seconds or whatever. It just refreshes the duration. So every time it's just up for 6 seconds. And this kind of makes us stagger out our death strikes, but due to our massive AoE damage, especially if you're running Bone Storm, you get quite a bit of healing from having the leech up basically constantly. Now that we've taken a look at all of the new talents and the talents that were removed, let's take a look at the talents that have been changed. So in the first row, they changed Blood Drinker. On live servers, this is a 2.2 second channel, and then in BFA, this is a 2.5 second channel. As long as they add extra damage to compensate for that 0.3 seconds of extra channel, this should be an okay change because it gives us more downtime to regenerate runes. But if the damage percent, and which I suspect will be kind of lower than it is on live servers, then this is actually a slight nerf to the ability. In the second row, we have Rapid Decomposition, and you might be able to immediately notice that there's a few lines of text immediately missing from this. So on live servers, we also get the Blood Plague and D&D damage increase, so it takes 15% more often. But on live servers, we also gain runic power every time we stand in our D&D, so we get 1 runic power per second while we're standing in our D&D. They completely removed that, and that was kind of a strong component of D&D. And especially on High Mythic Plus, where you were taking Spectral Deflection, it was definitely noticeable that you had less runic power overall. As I mentioned before, Hemostasis was nerfed by 50%, so on live servers this was a 20% benefit per stack, and in BFA this is a 10% benefit. Consumption, I already mentioned before, it was nerfed from a 45-second cooldown to a 1-minute cooldown, and they removed the leech from it. And then we have Anti-Magic Barrier, which was basically reworked. I don't know if it's a nerf or a buff yet, but what it did on live servers, whenever you pressed AMS, you got a 25% max HP bonus for 15 seconds. And what it does in the BFA, you can see here, is that it reduces the cooldown of your AMS and it increases the absorb amount, which kind of makes sense for the ability. And overall, I think this is a better change. Next, we have Tightening Grasps. So like I mentioned before, they basically just split this talent into 2. There's no nerf to the actual duration decrease or CDR that you get on your Mass Grip, but the slow component of your D&D was completely removed from it and moved over to Grip of the Dead. Foul Bulwark was also nerfed, and this was nerfed by 50%, so on live servers in Legion, it gives you 2% extra health per Bone Shield stack that you have active, and as you can see here, it is only 1%. So overall, it's a 50% nerf, which is quite detrimental in my opinion, because Blood Decays especially rely on having large health pools to survive melee attacks or large hits, because we don't have damage mitigation like most other tanks. Then Ossuary was one of those talents that was again completely reworked. What it did on live servers is that it gave you a 5 runic power discount on your death strike whenever you were at 5 bone shields or higher. And it also increased your maximum runic power by 10. What it does here in BFA is that it increases your maximum charges of bone shield from 10 to 15. So you're able to store up to 15 instead of, just 10. I don't think this is overall a big change, because as long as you manage your bone shields correctly, you kind of always linger between that 6 to 10 range. And with having to make the choice between Foul Bulwark and Ossuary, so you can't take them at the same time, having more bone shields doesn't really benefit you because you're not getting more maximum HP from Foul Bulwark. And it also increases your maximum runic power by 25, which is kind of a nice change, because if you're capped on runic power, or if you're at 5 below cap, then you're able to get 3 death strikes in without having to press any other buttons. One talent that I was really surprised to see being changed is Mark of Blood. So this talent saw no use on live servers, basically because it was in the same row with Red Thirst. And Red Thirst, as you might know, it reduces the cooldown of your vampiric blood every time you spend runic power. And this was an incredibly strong talent, especially pre-nerf. So Mark of Blood, we never really spec'd into it. And also, it's very rare that we have a situation where a boss attacks fast enough for us to get enough benefit from that percent healing. Because the way this works is every time the enemy damages you with auto attacks, it will heal you for 1% of your HP. And on live servers, this was 3% per swing, and in BFA it is 2% per swing. So it's overall a 33% nerf on it. But as long as you place it in a row with other talents that are not particularly strong, it might see some use in certain situations. Then in the last row, we saw Red Thirst being nerfed. You get 1 second CDR per 10 runic power instead of 1 second per 6 runic power, which we have in Legion. This talent was already nerfed once throughout Legion because it was just so powerful and we had Vampiric Blood up basically all of the time. This is quite a significant nerf, but overall I think it will still be the go-to single target talent whenever you're able to survive without having to spec into Purgatory. So Purgatory still gives you the safety net of huge hits or unexpected damage, but Red Thirst will just give you more consistency. And then Bone Storm was actually buffed, so this is one of the few talents that was actually buffed, and its healing went from 2% to 3% per tick. Overall, it's a nice buff, and also we have less options for AoE, and I think it kind of makes up for it, and especially in Mythic Plus and on keys where you don't really need the safety net from Purgatory or Red Thirst, this will be the go-to talent, and hopefully the damage will scale properly as well. That was my video on Blood DK talents. I hope you enjoyed it. I will have a more in-depth video in the future where I talk about potential builds that we might see pop up for single target and AoE, as well as survival versus DPS builds. But that will take a little bit more theory crafting and some testing in dungeons here. And I also heard that they enabled logs, so I will be taking a look at those pretty soon and come back to you guys with a video where I pitch you some ideas of builds that you might see going into BFA. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please hit the like button and sub to the channel. See you on the next one.